Good afternoon everyone, I hope you're all enjoying your time here at Textualities 2016. As you can see on the top left of the screen, I'm going to talk about Billy O'Callaghan, who is a short story writer from Cork. I suppose most of you haven't heard of him, so this presentation will be a brief introduction. Born in Douglas in 1974, O'Callaghan has had 3 short story collections published. In Exile and In Too Deep were published by Mercier Press in 2008 and 2009 respectively, and The Things We Lose, The Things We Leave Behind was published by New Island Press in 2013. As you can see now, O'Callaghan has won and been shortlisted for multiple awards, many of them international. However, although the title story of his collection, The Things We Lose, The Things We Leave Behind, was Short Story of the Year in the 2013 Irish Book Awards, there hasn't been much attention paid to his work in Ireland. He was also chosen as the Irish representative for the UNESCO Cities of Literature project in 2014. However, he has had a better reception abroad. He's been invited to readings in different countries and to 3 international conferences of the short story in English, the first one in Toronto, the second one in Vienna, and this coming July in Shanghai. O'Callaghan hasn't been to university and owes his writing skills to his having always been a voracious reader. For him, the short story seems a natural form of writing. This might come from the fact that his grandmother would often keep him from school to tell him stories about her childhood, the Black and Tans, or the Banshee. His art of the craft is greatly indebted to the reading of writers' interviews in the Paris Review. His many influences include great writers such as Steinbeck, Updike, Garcia Marquez, Joyce, Flannery O'Connor, Kawabata or Alice Munro, to name but a few. Hemingway is his personal favorite, and from him he takes the iceberg theory as the basis of his writing. Hemingway's influence, however, is not that apparent in O'Callaghan's writing, who uses a traditional realism and favors internal monologue because he believes that the unsaid reveals much more of our true selves. So, closer to the surface of O'Callaghan's writing, there's the influence of 2 other writers. John McGahern seems to be his great Irish influence, along with Joyce's Dubliners, and the Canadian writer Alistair MacLeod is a major influence in terms of setting, which brings me to talk about island stories. Setting is very important for O'Callaghan. It creates an atmosphere and symbolizes ideas that shouldn't be expressed in words in a short story. Thus, one of the most recurring settings in O'Callaghan's work are islands. John Donne's famous "No man is an island entire of itself" is constantly contested by O'Callaghan, who believes the opposite. The island setting heightens the sense of isolation and confined existence of the characters, while also grounding and shaping them, giving them a sense of belonging. For O'Callaghan, islands also work as metaphors of the short story itself as a form. You can see the sides very clearly, but at the same time, they can contain a whole world in them. Nonetheless, O'Callaghan is a cosmopolitan writer, and settings vary from Taiwan or Coney Island to Seville or Vietnam, which makes his writing not exclusively Irish and appealing to international audiences. Above all, it is his exploration of the essence of human emotions and the everyday that makes his themes universal. If every man is an island, then we become different people when interacting with others, which brings up the question of the true self. Our true self is found in isolation and in what we don't say rather than what we say. Therefore, the conflict of human relationships, whether romantic or familiar, is one of his major themes. As humans, one of the elements that shapes ourselves is our past and how we identify with it. O'Callaghan's characters are highly self-aware, and many of them reflect on how the loss of a significant relationship has changed them. The ever-present past of these characters has the power to either haunt them or be a relief. Thus, nostalgia is a part of many stories. The sociologist Fred Davis distinguished 3 types of nostalgia that move from simple longing to different levels of examination. The 3rd type, interpreted nostalgia, is the most common in O'Callaghan's characters, who question the entire experience of nostalgia. A great example can be found at the end of the story Keep Well to Seaward. So I'll quote, "Maybe it's true that as people we are not much more than the scars we wear. She changed the way I saw myself. It would seem that my story begins and ends with her, but actually I'm not so sure that even she is incidental. The image I've retained of her is likely idealized. That in itself says something about me, I think." And thinking of the past and its importance of course also brings up the question of time and how we perceive it. Psychological time is not the same as clock time. Again, the island setting becomes important here because it can create a sense of timelessness. The passage of time is less noticeable in a place that hasn't changed a lot. But of course there are changes in islands as well. However, not being used to changes can make them seem threatening. This threat to tradition and the dying out of the old ways are also reflected upon by islander characters, who present different attitudes toward change. All these elements come together in stories like Waiting, in which the narrator and his sisters take care of their grandmother in her deathbed. The old woman represents tradition. The reader is presented to memories of her singing all Irish songs about men lost to the sea, and a scholar from Dublin also comes to record her to preserve the Irish folklore. However, the narrator does see the passing away as sad but necessary. There's a sense that traditions need to change and adapt to reality at the moment that the narrator tells us of his grandfather, who died in the sea and is held as a legend in the village, where made-up stories about his epic death are told. However, no stories are told about his father, who died of a brain tumor. There's so much more to Emilio Callahan's stories in terms of setting, themes and style. Unfortunately, my time today is limited, but I do encourage you to read them, especially if you like characters who live in the everyday and affront real conflicts. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you enjoy my presentation, and please feel free to ask any questions afterwards. Thank you.